Well, let's take a look at this particular set of machines that we have in this cluster. We can see that we have a set of data nodes, and we have a name node and a secondary name node. And one of the operations that you often want to do to a cluster is to decommission a machine in the cluster. Now, because HDFS is robust, you technically don't need to do anything explicit. You can pull the cable out of the wall and the cluster will continue, but because the machine was removed unexpectedly, it's going to have to react to that, and it's going to have to replicate data and move it around and bring the cluster back to the maximum health. But if you know that you're going to remove a machine, you can actually be preemptive about this, and you can say, I'm going to remove this one, please replicate the data to the other nodes in the cluster before I actually remove it. And that's what a decommissioning operation is. So I'm going to pick a machine, in this case data node 3, and I'm going to decommission button. And it's going to ask me, are you sure I want to do this? Yes, I am. And so I click. And in this case we see a progress screen. It's similar to the one that we saw before for restarting, but here it's actually showing the various steps involved in decommissioning and showing our progress through those steps. Anybody who's actually tried to do decommissioning without Cloudera Manager will know that it's a fairly involved process with multiple steps, but now we've reduced it to a single click, and it's easy for us to tell when it's done. And here we've changed it so that it's just a single mouse click, and off it goes. Right, and now our node has been decommissioned. And if we go back to the instances page, we can see that the node is no longer running, and its health is in fact bad, so perhaps it's a good thing that we decommissioned it when we did. Now, if you're decommissioning the machine because you need to take it offline for maintenance and you're going to bring it back, then you would go and do that work and you could restart it afterwards. But if you were decommissioning the machine because you were going to replace it completely, then you'd actually want to remove it from the cluster. So we can select it again and we can choose delete. Now, before we complete the deletion operation, Cloudera Manager has made a set of recommendations for configuration changes. And the reason why it's done that is because this machine is no longer going to be serving as a data node, there are resources on the machine which are no longer going to be used for that purpose, and it's suggesting ways that we can redistribute them to the other roles on the machine. So in this case, to the MapReduce task tracker, to a Zookeeper server. And so let's continue with this process. And now we can see that the machine is gone. That was data node 3 for people who are keeping track. And let's say that we want to add a new machine to our cluster to replace the one that we've removed. And to do that, we would click the Add button, which brings us to this page here, showing us all the machines that Cloudera Manager knows about and which are candidates to be added. And it's also showing us what the role assignments currently are. So where is our name node, where is our secondary name node, where are our existing data nodes, and so on. To help ensure that you're making an informed decision, it actually calls out what are the other roles assigned to the hosts. So we can look at this machine here and see what it's doing for HBase, Zookeeper, MapReduce, and so on. So I'm, in this case, adding back the machine that I removed. In practice, it would probably be a different one. And again, a set of recommendations are being made. In this case, the recommendations are going in the opposite direction. Because we're adding a new role, we actually have to make sure that resources are reserved for it. And so, for example, if we look, you can see that the heap size recommendations have gone down slightly from before, and that reflects the fact that memory has to be reserved for the data node. And here is the progress screen for this add operation. You'll notice at the end that the last step here is refreshing the node list. People who've used Hadoop before will know that when you add a new node to a cluster and you're using the whitelisting capabilities, you have to refresh that list, otherwise the new node won't be accepted as part of the cluster, and we do that step automatically. So in the last few minutes, I've made a whole bunch of changes to this service. I've changed the configuration value, I've restarted it, I've decommissioned, removed, and then re-added a machine. And that's a lot of stuff. And it's often useful to know what happened and when it happened. So if we go and look at the audit log here, we can see a list of all the events that occurred, when they occurred, and who was the user responsible for them. And we can see that these correspond to the operations that we undertook. So we can see here the create role call, which corresponds to my add. If we move back, we see the delete, we can see the decommission, we can see the restart, and we can see the configuration change down here, which is the beginning of this process I've been going through.